And welcome back to another episode of the Cardboard Herald, my chance to talk with creative gamers and game creators. And I'm thrilled that joining me today again is Gabe Barrett of Board Game Design Lab. Welcome back to the show, Gabe.
Jack, appreciate you having me back, man. It's good to be here.
Yeah, how you doing?
I am doing very well. I think, last time we talked, things were moving along fairly well, and they have definitely picked up speed and gotten crazier, but also better. And so, yeah, life's good.
Yeah, and you're expanding. I mean, you've taken all this board game design knowledge that you have taken in from the show and then put out there in the world, and you have consolidated it into an upcoming release. You have Final Flicktier on the horizon. Why don't you tell me about that, man?
Yeah, so this is a game. I actually had the idea. A while back, I was interviewing a guy from my own show, and we were talking about dexterity games, and he had a really cool game called Dino Dunk that he had been working on, which is a flicking game where you're flicking discs around as dinosaurs playing basketball, which is just a really interesting thing, right? Not too many of those out there. And while we were talking, I remember writing down in my little notepad, and I have where all my notes are, my questions and stuff. I wrote down 4X dexterity, just as a random idea, right? Like this is something that needs to be on the shelves. And after that episode, I went and just started kind of looking up, hey, does this exist? And it's not something that's really been done very much. I think just really one or two other games that aren't even in print anymore. And so I was like, man, could be a really interesting idea. It could also be like super terrible, like a really bad idea.
Yeah.
And so I started just kind of playing around with it, and it has become a real thing. And I'm just excited to kind of put it out there in the world, and Kickstarter coming up. And yeah, it's been a lot of fun to develop and figure out how to do it in such a way, because you can't have a dexterity game that lasts 4 hours. Like you can't have Twilight Imperium, the dexterity game. Like that was just.
Well, you could. Would it be good? I don't know about that.
But would it be any good? Would anybody want to play it? Maybe not so much. And so it's been a really interesting design challenge to figure out how to make a dexterity game also have the depth of a 4X style game, but play in 60 minutes. And it's been a lot of fun.
And you feel like it has that depth?
Yeah, definitely do. Lots of really interesting actions and choices on your turn, and lots of different strategies that have emerged. And there's 4 different factions in the base game, and working on some expansion factions as well that give you a little bit of asymmetrical play. And so every faction is a little bit different, gives you different options and play styles and different ways to kind of approach things. And yeah, I feel really good about it's 4X. I mean, you're exploring, you're doing different things and finding new places to go. You're exploiting, so you're getting resources from planets, you're expanding, you're building structures and building stuff on those planets to get victory points in the end, and you're exterminating. You're using, this is a dice flicking game, and so you're using your dice, your ships, to flick around the galaxy and attack other ships when it feels good. And so yeah, I feel really good about actually accomplishing the goal I set out to of 4X dexterity.
It sounds exciting, man, and I'm excited to check it out, because that seems like a writing prompt or a challenge that someone would give themselves. It's like, let's take 2 random things. I mean, me as a musician, that's like saying tuba overture. How do I make those things work? You're like 4X
extra rap and cello.
Exactly. Now, let's talk about the name here really quick. You got games like Dino Dunk, Flip Ships, Flick Fleet, Push Car, Final Flicktier. Why do you think dexterity as a mechanism so often gets incorporated into the title of a game?
Yeah, you missed Flick 'em Up. Which might be
Flick 'em Up. Yeah, I mean, there's tons of them out there. I could go down an entire list of them where it seems like games like Catacombs are the dramatic exception to the rule, where you're not incorporating some sort of movement or adjective into the title itself.
Yeah, for sure. Now, actually, I got a little bit of pushback. I had a couple people on Facebook online that say, hey, I really hate the title. I love the idea of the game, love the art. It seems fun. Your title is terrible. And that's fair. You're going to run into that no matter what title you choose, it seems like. But I feel like so many games use this idea of putting flick or putting something in the title. But I think it's to really make sure the demographic you're going for knows about your game, right? When they see it on a shelf or they see it on Kickstarter or whatever, they go, oh, I love dexterity games. This says flick in it, so obviously it's probably a dexterity game, and this is kind of thing I want to check out. So it's really just kind of reaching out to your target audience and saying right from the title, hey, this is a game for you. Because I feel like dexterity is one of those things, either you really like it or you really don't. There's not a whole lot of people in the middle that are like, yeah, I guess I could play a dexterity game. No, it's like you really want to play one or you really kind of hate them. I feel like there's probably a handful of people in the middle. And so I think reaching out with the title of the game right to that target audience is just the way to go.
Right. And there are certainly a lot of people. I find that it's more often the type of person who's very passionate about dexterity games are the people who are very passionate about hating dexterity games. Then there are people who like them and also some that love them, but the people who are really vocal about it, and I guess maybe that's just internet in general, people who hate something are the most vocal. But I find that the most successful and the most interesting and the most celebrated dexterity games are the ones that the dexterity is a way of achieving something that wouldn't otherwise be possible within the structure of an otherwise very well thought out mechanical design, like a game that the dexterity solidifies something that would otherwise take pages upon pages of rules and gives an elegant presentation that's intuitive because it operates in the same physical reality that you and I do. So what about Final Flicktier is achievable only by being a dexterity game, or was the whole intent from the beginning to make something surrounding a dexterity game?
Yeah, so if you think about most 4X games, Twilight Imperium, Eclipse, even a game kind of like Scythe, it has some 4X elements going on in it. It's typically like a very plotting game. Like I'm going to move from this hex to that hex, and the next turn I'm going to try to move to that hex, and it kind of slowly expand, you slowly move around.
I'm going to tell Jamie Stegmaier that you said that Scythe is plotting.
I'm not the only one. I love Scythe. Like, don't get me wrong, it's one of my favorite games for sure.
Yeah,
but it has a plotting nature to it, which is also kind of cool because so does chess, right? Mm-hmm. Chess is a very plotting game as you kind of move down the board trying to get to the other your opponent's territory and take over and different things like that. And so there's nothing wrong with plotting. It's just a different style of game. Where with this one, instead of plotting from hex to hex, you can look at the board. And so the board is made of 2 neoprene mats, right? And so the dice, which are your ships, they flick really well, they slide, they roll really well on the mats. And you can say, okay, I'm over here in my corner of the world, or corner of the galaxy on my home planet. I want to go way over there to that other planet that's like way across the galaxy. Now, if this was a normal, hex-based game, I would have to take 6 turns to get there. But in this game, you can take 1 turn. As long as you're skillful enough to flick that die, across the board and get it to land on the planet that you want it to, that's an option. Now, you want to take the safe route and you want to go to this planet and that planet and kind of move around the board and do it a little bit safer, you can do that. Same thing with attacking, right? So the way you attack is you flick a die and you try to hit another die. And there's more to it. There's combat cards and there's some nuances to things we can talk about in a little bit. That was another design challenge, is figuring out the attacking. But if you want to attack somebody all the way across the galaxy, well, in Eclipse, you got to work your way over there. In Twilight Imperium, you got to move your fleet like all the way over there to get there and then do your thing. Well, in this game, you can go, hey, you're winning. Yeah, I think you're up by a couple points. I'm going to take out your mothership over there. And so I'm going to go from across the board. I'm just going to see if I can Tiger Woods my shot from, halfway down the green. I'm going to see if I can get a hole in one on this thing and flick. And it's a big risk, but it's also a big reward. And so, yeah, I think that's the main thing is normal 4X games, it's a little bit slower, whereas this one you can kind of do things at a quicker pace.
How do you account for skill in a dexterity game? Like when you were making this, obviously people who are more skillful at flicking things around, physical capabilities, and also, adults are going to inherently play a lot better than children. There's a lot of extra balance considerations that you have to make when doing a dexterity game. And what did you do to overcome that challenge?
Yeah, for sure. That was a big issue going in. I love dexterity games. I'm pretty good at them. I flick really well. Also, in so many prototype versions, I was basically practicing. I was flicking over and over again and trying different sizes of dice and different, should I use tokens? Should I use wood? Should I use dice? And so I got pretty good at it. And then, but I started play testing with people who had never played dexterity games, who weren't all that great at it, who, they could do it. And they're adults, so they're not like kids with their motor skills aren't there yet. And so I was like, okay, how do I mitigate bad flicks? How do I mitigate, somebody who's just not very good at this? Because dexterity games can be really, really not fun for someone who's not very good at it. And then like, oh, I missed. That's my whole turn. I guess it's your turn. Like, that's not fun.
Totally.
And so one thing was to make sure that every turn, no matter what, even if you had a bad flick and you try to put the ship on that planet and you totally missed and like, well, now what do I do? There's always other options. So there's other things that you can do on your turn, whether you're upgrading, you're working on your tech tree, or you're taking resources from planets that you've got buildings on, whatever. There's always other things you can do as backup plans in case that first plan of, okay, I want to go to that planet over there messes up. Also, making sure people have multiple flicks. So you start the game and you get 2 flicks. And so you can flick a ship twice, or you can flick 2 ships once. And so that gives you a little bit more options, a little more leeway. It's not one and done. But then also adding in ways to mitigate, bad flicks. And so there's a couple factions that they get extra flicks as part of like their upgrades. So you have different tech trees and different research you can do. And like one of those is the humans. They're really good at exploring. And so one of their upgrades is you get to reflick a die. And so if you have a bad flick, we'll just put it back where it was and try it again. And so if you have maybe you have a younger player, well, that might be a good faction for them to use because they can get that extra flick as part of their faction. But then there's also a tech tree that everybody has access to. And one of the things you get there is an extra flick. And so now you have 3 flicks on your turn as opposed to just 2. And so it's really about finding ways to mitigate dice flicks and give people more opportunities, and then also more options on their turn. That way, if you screw up, you still got things you can do.
I'll need it. I'll need it. I love dexterity games, but trust me, I'll need it. Yeah. So you've been doing Board Game Design Lab for a while now. How much of the show has influenced this specific project? I mean, other than the moment of brilliance in which you were like, 4X and dexterity, chocolate and peanut butter, they go together. Are there specific episodes of the show, specific conversations that have really influenced the design process as you were making this game?
Yeah, definitely. It's hard to pinpoint like very specific episodes, but there's been so much just amazing wisdom and knowledge that people have shared on the show, and I get to absorb it twice, right? I hear it once during the show, and I hear it twice. It's the second time during editing, right? And so it's really cool how all this wisdom has just kind of bounced around in my brain. And people have asked me, a couple different times when I've talked to folks, hey, well, how have you grown as a designer because of this? It's the same as being like mentored by some of the best people in the world. Like you have these conversations, and so your level of understanding of things accelerates, right? I feel like I would be in a much different place design wise had I not been doing the show, had I not been listening to all these amazing, very wise people. I wouldn't be nearly as far along. Right. It's the same if you haven't read a bunch of books, if you haven't taken classes, if you haven't done certain things, you're not going to be as knowledgeable of whatever you're trying to learn. You're not going to have the experience or the information, whatever. It's the same thing, right? This has been like just a really cool masterclass for the last 100 or so episodes of the show of just amazing people with amazing wisdom. And I've been super fortunate to just kind of bounce around and learn from so many amazing people.
Did I just hear like a timpani or something in the background?
I accidentally bumped my microphone stand. Sorry about
that. Okay. I was like, man, you breaking out the big drums.
Yeah, I got emotional. Sorry.
What was the biggest challenge in designing this game?
Figuring out what I wanted to do as far as the ships. So originally it was I found these really cool 3D printable ships online. And a friend of mine, and when I was in the States over the summer, he's got a really nice 3D printer. And so we printed those, and I super glued them to these plastic tokens. And that originally was your ship. You're just flicking around your ship and trying to bump into planets so that all the planets were made of wood. There's these big wooden circles. And that was interesting. It was okay. But really figuring out, all right, is this any fun? Because it wasn't all that fun. It was like, all right, I'm flicking this thing, and the weight's off, and it's like odd, and your ship weighs different than mine. And so like it wasn't balanced at all in anything like that.
I wish more people had your perspective to sit back from what they've been working on and say, wait a second, yes, there are mechanisms here, but is this fun?
Right. It just wasn't fun. I felt like I was flicking plastic around a table. That's what I felt like. It's like, I don't know, this doesn't feel very interesting to me. And so I just kind of shelved it for a couple of weeks and just kind of sat on that idea. I was like, gosh, I feel like there's a game somewhere in here. I just got to figure out what it is. And then I had the idea, well, just use dice. I think I saw a dexterity game called Dice Quest, I think, where you have these D6s that are like your warriors, you're protecting your king, and you're flicking these dice around. It was really cool. And I was like, well, I'll just use dice. Let's try that. And that worked. And you're flicking dice around. And I thought, well, some factions can use different dice. So some use D4s and some use D8s. And then one has a D12. And I'm even working on like a big Death Star kind of faction where he's got a D20. So you're rolling around a D20 around the galaxy, blowing up people's planets. And so that was a big breakthrough, is figuring out, okay, the ships aren't going to be tokens. They're not going to be little wooden discs. They're going to be dice. And that's going to give me some really cool options for things. And then figuring out combat, right? Because one thing you run into with these games is people have a tendency to just flick the crap out of stuff. Like that's one issue that games like Catacombs and others have run into, is they had to put a wall around their board because like it was so often that people were flicking stuff and it'd go off the table, go underneath your refrigerator. It's now your cat's got it. He's run off. He's upstairs and chewing on your disc now. What are you going to do? And so like, how do you mitigate that? How do you figure out how to keep players from having the incentive of just flicking as hard as they possibly can? And so the way I figured out how to do that is when you attack somebody. So I've got my die, you've got yours. I say, okay, I'm going to attack this die over here. We both play a combat card, and so that's going to give us some bonuses here in a second. But then I have this little card. It's a poker-sized card, and it says hyperspace on it. And you put that directly behind whatever die you're trying to attack. And then I flick my die, and the rule is I have to contact your die in some way. I mean, it could just be a little tap, just be a little brushing. But as long as I make contact, it's a successful hit. But if I hit your die in like so hard, if I put so much momentum into it that your die goes beyond that hyperspace card, this card's basically a measurement, right? If it goes beyond that card, then the battle doesn't happen. Effectively, your ship saw my fleet coming and you took off. You're like, nope, I'm out. And you jumped to hyperspace and you left. And so when I got there, you weren't even anywhere to be found. And you get to move your die anywhere you want on the board.
Oh, okay.
So if you really wanted next turn to go to that planet across over there, now you can for free, and you don't even have to flick to get there. And so it really incentivizes people being measured and really kind of using just enough force to hit the die, to make contact, to make the attack, but not just flicking the mess out of something. And so that was a really interesting breakthrough as far as the design challenge of like, okay, how do we fix this problem?
And how do the dice actually work? Like, do the numbers presented on the top of the die come into play if you roll as you're moving, as you're flicking? How does that all interact with the game design?
Yeah, so going back to the attacking, when I flick my die, whatever number is showing is my current attack value. And so if I had a 4 and I flicked yours and now I have a, and they roll, they change. And so let's say I have a 5 up and you have a 4 up. Okay, well then we've both played a combat card. And now I flip mine over, you flip yours over, and you add those numbers up. So maybe I have a 5 and a 2, so it gives me 7, and you have a 4 and a 4, it gives you 8, you win. My ship blows up, it goes back to my home planet, your ship stays there to fight another day. And so, yeah, the numbers, and so there's some times in the game where you have a 1 sitting up, and you're like, oh, shoot, like somebody might come attack me, because, my power level, maybe your ship's a little bit, little broken down, and you want to try to fix it up a little bit, and so you might try to flick it in such a way that it lands with a higher number on it. And so that comes into the strategy of the flicking as well.
Yeah, that actually presents a ton of really cool options because you got dice like a D4, which has a lower threshold that it can hit. It can only go up to 4, but it's probably much more stable than a D6 or, dare I say, that D20 that is just like the chaos machine.
Yeah, absolutely.
So how about going forward? You live in Honduras. Is there any particular challenge that's imposed upon you in being a publisher who lives in Honduras? Are you going to have manufacturing happen in China and then deliver to distribution centers in the UK and America? What's your game plan and what challenges have you found just by sheer proximity?
Yeah, for sure. That was really one of the main reasons I was very reluctant about getting into Kickstarter and publishing my own games to start with, right? It's not like I can ship these games to my house and put them in my garage, right? It just doesn't work that way. And so, yeah, working with fulfillment centers and being real sure about where the games are going and just doing a lot of the math and making sure, I'm not screwing myself over in the end, right? And so making sure these games get to where they need to go. The biggest challenge right now is getting prototypes here, right? So you're printing through the Game Crafter and then getting them here in a timely fashion. But the good news is there's a pretty steady flow of people coming in and out of Honduras, especially where I live here at this school. And so like right now, my boss, the superintendent of the school, he's in the States. And so I have a prototype on its way to his house. I think it's his son's visiting for the weekend. And his son his son's wife just had a baby. And so he's there for the weekend. I said, hey, can you bring me a game back? Like, can you have, like, I have to really rely on the kindness of friends here. But he's going to bring it back in a suitcase, and that'll give me the most recent prototype to really get to the table and make sure everything's tweaked and balanced in the way it needs to. And also for the Kickstarter video and whatnot, and making sure that the video has the most final art and updated components they can have.
Hey man, smuggle me a prototype. Needed to go get past customs.
That's right.
Oh man. So let's switch gears a little bit and talk about the podcasting world. We're on a podcast. We might as well talk about podcasts. How do you feel like you've evolved as an interviewer over these last 100 or so episodes?
Yeah, that's a good question. Big thing. I probably am not great at this yet. I have a tendency to say the same types of words. Like I say definitely a lot. I say for sure a lot. Like now I see this a lot when I'm going back and editing. I'm like, I think I said definitely 17 times in one episode. And so I've gotten better at it. I've still got a long way to go as far as not repeating the same stuff, as far as those keywords over and over again. I think I've gotten a little better as an interviewer and giving people better questions, giving people more opportunities to talk and kind of follow up. And yeah, that's a good question. The quality's gotten better for sure. It's been super helpful. I moved into a new apartment, which is helpful as well. It's not nearly as echoey, and so that's been a game changer. And I also got these really cool sound panels. You can see behind me on the Skype chat. Got some sound panels on the sides here and behind me. Also been super helpful, just making the quality of the audio sound a lot better. So just a handful of ways here and there, and I'm just looking forward to growing and getting better as an interviewer as it goes.
Are you still as hungry and passionate about talking to people about game design and development and production as you once were? Or are you finding yourself wishing you could have this level of access with people in other sorts of fields that are totally non-game related?
Yeah, I haven't really thought about doing anything non-game related. I love where I'm at right now. I love what I'm doing. Over the summer was kind of hard because I just had a lot of stuff going on, some things that were just really frustrating from just a personal standpoint and things I was dealing with and with my job and things like that. And what was great is that I was still interviewing people. And so like those interviews on a lot of those days were like the highlight of my day. It's like, I cannot wait to get to this interview here in 2 hours, right? Today kind of sucks, but in 2 hours, I'm going to talk to a really cool person who knows more than I do about game design. And I've been wanting to talk to him for a while or whatever it is. And so it was really helpful this summer for sure. And then, with the podcast, I don't see how people do this without interviewing people. Like if it was just me, like talking, I don't think I could do it. Like this would be super difficult to get up the energy and the motivation to do. But it's been really great to schedule people and get them on the calendar. And then, I have to show up now, and I have to be accountable to them. I don't want to waste their time, right? So that's been super helpful. But just talking to people has been I love talking to people. I just enjoy it. I love asking questions. And so, yeah, I think I'm still enjoying it just as much now as I did 2 years ago.
Alive or dead, who's someone that you would most want to talk with? Not even interviewed. You're a talker. You're enthusiastic. You just love listening to people. You love gathering information. Who's someone you would just love to have a conversation with? Yeah,
that's a good question. Man, I don't know. That's a great question. And anybody, not game design, right?
Yeah, anyone. Could be game design.
I owe it to my high school and college self to talk to Jerry Rice at least one good time. Okay. Jerry Rice and Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, two of my absolute favorite people in the world, two of my heroes, two people I look up. And it's also dangerous. Like, you don't want to meet your heroes necessarily. Like, I'm sure they're not nearly as great as I built them up to be. But those are two people that are living that would be just phenomenal to just sit down and chat with, talk to about life and, their motivation and how they overcame obstacles and things like that. Just two people I really looked up to, mainly because I was playing football. And, that was kind of the life that I wanted, the life I was living at the time back then. Even now, though, Dwayne Johnson, his work ethic. You take his work ethic in the weight room and the way he approaches movies, and you apply it to anything else, and you can become the best in the world at whatever you're doing. And like whether it's being a rocket scientist or selling shoes at a Foot Locker or working on game design, like you apply his process for getting better and staying on top to anything, and I think you could just be phenomenal. And so it'd be really cool just to kind of hang out with him.
And he's kind of the complete package. I mean, charisma, he's got focus, he's enthusiastic, he's positive. There's a lot of things that you could get out of a conversation with that dude. Yeah,
I saw a T-shirt online today. It was sold out. I was so frustrated, but it's an Under Armour shirt, and it's got the Rock's logo on it, and above the logo it just says "Get to work." I was like, "Heck yeah, man! That's a great shirt. I just want to wear that around and look in the mirror and go, get to work. All right, let's go." It's just he's awesome.
Just need to play some board games with him.
That'd be amazing. I don't know. I wonder what kind of games The Rock would want to play. I think any game. I think he's like such a friendly dude. He's like, whatever you want to play, we'll play it. And he'd figure it out. I think he's just that way.
Mr. Johnson, can I present to you Final Flicktier?
That's right. That'd be cool. That'd be my whole Kickstarter video. Just me and him playing. I wouldn't even tell people about the game. Like, hey, it's me with Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. We're playing this game today.
Yeah.
Buy it, please. That's it. That's all I'd say.
If you don't back this, he will find you.
And he'll lay at the smackdown.
Were you a wrestling guy?
Huge wrestling fan. I actually thought about, like, I was real close on like 2 or 3 different occasions to just saying, I'm going to go do it. And like going off to wrestling school and going all in and just trying to be a professional wrestler. I did it for a little while, and I lived in Tennessee for just, I don't know, a handful of months. And there was a little indie promotion there, and they had a wrestling school, and you paid this guy like $50 per per session or whatever. And so like I went and trained for a little bit, and it was fun, and it was the most painful thing I've ever done in my life. There were people that are like, oh, it's fake. I promise you, it is the most excruciating pain you will ever go through, other than like surgery or like breaking a bone. Like just it was awful. Like you land on that mat, it is not soft. It is plywood with a canvas on top. You're landing on wood, and the ropes are literally elevator cables, like the cables that hoist up elevators. That's the same cables that are on the ring ropes, just with tape over top of them. And so like I had these bruises across my back, just like black and blue lines from hitting the ropes, and like it was the deepest pain I've ever. Like it was painful, like soreness, kind of like muscle soreness after lifting weights, but like deep down into my organs, it felt like it was so much worse than like any workout I'd ever done. But yeah, I really thought about doing it.
Yeah, when I was a kid, I was one of those people who was like, don't you know wrestling is fake? And, it's totally just all made up. And it got put into perspective for me when someone told me it's not fake, it's staged. There is a difference. Absolutely. And from that moment and seeing it through that lens, it completely recontextualized everything. That this is a huge testament to the physical prowess of all of these people and the storylines, the interactions, the developments, like all of them have to be crafted. It takes an extreme amount of dedication and talent and luck in a lot of regards. People have definitely been real life injured in doing staged physical acts of that magnitude. And that kind of brought me into tolerating the world more than actually engaging with it. By the time where I was thinking about things that light, I was probably like 22 years old or something. And at that point I was like, oh, okay, well, I'll tolerate it.
It's one of those things, like once you really understand everything that goes into it, like it's got to be one of the most difficult jobs in the world. Yeah. And it's like, oh, it's not a job. No, think about, you have to be an absolute top physical. Now, if you're going to be in the top, now there's plenty of like indie promotions you can go to, and there's like a 300-pound out of shape guy who's smoking a cigarette in the ring. Okay, that's what I'm talking about. I'm talking about like WWE, the highest level of competition, so to speak. You have to be in the top physical condition of your life. You have to look good, like your muscles have to look good. You have to, go through all these things of making sure you look good on camera. You have to memorize all this stuff, like all the promos and all that stuff. You have to memorize, like it's like an actor memorizing a script. But you do it live. It's not like, oh, we can go take two. Like, no, you just screwed that up in front of 40,000 people in an arena and millions of people watching at home. Like, you just look like a moron in front of a lot of people. And then you have to do all that stuff without killing other people. That's the thing about, like, UFC is amazing. Those guys are in incredible shape, but you're punching people trying to hurt them. In wrestling, you're punching people trying to not hurt them. You want it to look like it hurts, but you don't want to break their neck, right? These are your friends. These are people you have to go on the next night to another city, another show, and make sure they're still in great shape too. And so, man, it's a lot harder to power bomb somebody through a table and not kill them than it would be just to like drop them and let them die. So it's just a lot of stuff going on. I have mad respect for those guys.
For sure. Well, let's get back to the game. So I'm sure at this point...
I should have created a wrestling game is what you're saying.
Well, maybe you just need to write that down and it's more inspiration.
Wrestling game.
You're going to say, all right, wrestling, trick-taking, and fantasy. There you go.
Fantasy. There you go. Fantasy wrestling. It's orcs. An orc wrestling trick-taking game.
Yeah.
Orcs and dwarves. That'll work.
I can dig it. So let's take it back to the game. I'm sure at this point that you've done like a few dozen viable games that you've sketched out, that you started working on, that you could have taken to this point. But why final Flicktier? Like, what was it about this game that you thought this was going to be the debut joint by Gabe Barrett?
Yeah, for sure. Now, there's a lot of games I've designed that I feel really good about that need miniatures or they need some custom components. Like they need stuff beyond the scope that I wanted to get into for my first Kickstarter, right? I didn't want to do miniatures. I didn't want to do all these things that were like custom components and extra costs and things to worry about and extra things to pay for. I didn't want to do a deck building game that takes 150 pieces of art, which would be, tens of thousands of dollars if you're going to do that well. I want to do something that was simple, that was smaller in scope, that was mainly dice and cards and some neoprene mats. That's something that I've seen so many Kickstarter creators. They do their first game, and it's this giant, amazing looking, could be awesome, but it's this giant project. And it's like, is that really what you want to start off with? Like, I feel like doing something smaller, something easier to get your hands around is a better way to go. And so that's part of it. I've got games with publishers right now that they're reviewing, and so I'm still pitching other games to publishers. Like you said, I've got a things I've worked on. But with this one, I was like, I want to do this myself. I want to do the art direction. I want to do everything that goes into it, and I want to figure this stuff out, right? And because one day maybe I will do a bigger game, and so this game would be a great one to kind of learn from and make some mistakes for sure, but also grow and kind of understand the process a lot better.
Since you're self-publishing this one, what's your self-publishing company?
Yeah, so years ago, I started a little LLC called Barrett Publishing, just my last name, Publishing. And that was mainly to print books and sell books. I've been writing books for a long time. I think I've written 7 so far, working on the 8th. And, that was just an LLC I already had. And that's what the podcast just kind of rolled up underneath as well with the business side of that. And so it just made sense. I thought about doing Board Game Design Lab as like a little imprint and having a game creation, a game company side of things. But I didn't want it to be confusing. I didn't want the brands to get kind of mixed up in people's minds. And so, just going with Barrett Publishing.
We already talked a little bit about dexterity games and how there are certainly some people who are turned off by dexterity games or feel like, I don't ever want to touch them. If it's got dexterity, do not even bring it anywhere near me. Do you think that there's anything in this game that would convince them that this is something different? Yeah,
for sure. Now, this game, it's not strictly dexterity. There's other stuff going on. There's lots of great dexterity games, and that's really all you do. You're going to flick, and you're going to flick some more. This one, you're going to flick, but then there's a lot of other choices. Like, do I want to flick to that planet or that planet to then build a building to then exploit and get some resources? Do I want to upgrade? Like, there's a lot of other choices going on, and the flicking is part of it, but it's not the whole game. With flip ships, great game. I played it several times over the summer. Really, really enjoyed it. But it's just flipping. Like you're flip cards every single turn. That's all you're going to do. And if you're not any good at that, it's not going to be a great experience. Like if you flip every time you do it, it goes way off. Doesn't even come close to what you're trying to land on. It's like it's going to have a not a great time. But with Final Flicktier, that's just part of the game. It's like 33%. It's not 100%. And so if you hate dexterity, okay, maybe it's not the game for you. But if you're just like, well, I don't know, it's just not my thing, give it a shot because it's not the whole game.
If you're dex curious.
That's a great way to put it.
It's a good on-board point.
Yep.
You talked a little bit about the races and how there's different ways that they'll have asymmetric powers, that kind of stuff. Can you give some specific examples of like differences between maybe 2 or 3 specific races that are in this game?
Yeah, for sure. So I mentioned earlier that the humans are very exploration oriented, and so they get extra flicks, and you can kind of move a little bit easier with them. And they're trying to build colonies throughout the galaxy, and you get more resources from these colonies, and so they can get resources easier. They can also build warp gates, which allow you to basically teleport from planet to planet. It's kind of like Stargate, the old TV show. I wish they'd reboot or redo something. There needs to be a Stargate board game. That would be really cool. But anyway, I digress. And so they've got warp gates, and you can kind of bounce around the galaxy, and it's a lot easier for them. There's the Noxian Empire, and they're very warrior based. They're kind of like the Klingons. They just want to go fight people. And in the lore of the game, their planet has been destroyed. Their planet got blown up, kind of like Alderaan in Star Wars. And so now they're trying to find another planet and also just want to make other people feel the way they felt, right? And they've got these really big dice. They got D8s and D12s, and so they're really good at combat, and they've got some things that kind of make combat easier for them to win, and they get more victory points from combat than other races. There's the Corvallis Trade Federation, and they're friendly, but they're merchants, and they're basically trying to monopolize the galaxy. They're trying to build markets and warehouses around, and it's a lot easier for them to fulfill, like deliver mission. There's mission cards in the game that give you different objectives you can kind of get victory points from, and for them it's a lot easier to deliver and get points from taking goods to other planets and that kind of thing. And then there's the Surge, which is kind of like the Flood from Halo. And they're just trying to plant eggs everywhere, right? And they've got a really cool...
You always got to have some sort of bug or infestation, infection, plant, whatever science fiction you have. You got to have some sort of hive mind thing spreading its hive mind goodness all over the universe.
Definitely. It would not be complete as a space game if you didn't have something like that. And so they've got different mechanics that allow them to incapacitate other ships, and they can build stuff a lot cheaper, a lot easier than other folks. And so, those are the 4 main factions. And then there's a couple expansion. One is a bounty hunter. And so they introduce these bounty hunter cards that go on to the board in different places, and you can get these bounties. And they've got some different mechanics going on with them. And then there's the Doracor Dominion, or Dominion of Doracor. I'm not sure yet where I want to put that. But they're the evil empire Empire kind of thing. They've got that big D20 and they're rolling around and they're trying to destroy your home planet. They're the ones that destroyed the Noxian planet, and now they get a ton of victory points if they blow up the other home planets in the galaxy. And so, yeah, everybody's a little bit different. But at the same time, the core gameplay is pretty much the same. And so no matter which faction you pick, you've still got very similar choices to everybody else, but then you've got some interesting ways that you're a little bit better, a little bit different than other folks.
There's a surprising amount of thought process put into the lore here. Did you actually really sit down and think up a fiction for this world, for this universe, how you wanted to make it distinct from other science fiction settings, that type of thing?
Yeah, not a ton. Like, I didn't sit down and write, tons and tons and tons, but I wanted everybody to have a backstory. Like, on the back of their faction card, you can read, there's a couple paragraphs about who they are, what they're trying to accomplish, how they came to be. And I wanted to give a little bit of theme in there, right? And so people, like, if you're playing the Noxian Empire and the Doracor Dominions rolling around, you're like, I want to go destroy that daggum Death Star because they blew up my planet, and it kind of gives you a little bit extra, thing to think about. It's not necessarily game mechanics. It's not going to, you're not going to necessarily get more victory points necessarily, but it gives you something cool to talk about and kind of have fun and tell stories at the table. And I wanted to make sure that was part of the game. And I'd also do things that were similar but different, right? And so you see things, you're like, okay, this kind of reminds me of, the Flood from Halo. Yeah, absolutely. I want people to kind of see those things and go, oh, this is kind of cool. I remember this movie or this TV show, and that, kind of have that nostalgia in there, but also some new ideas.
You keep on saying Doracora, and I think of Doracora the Explorer. And that's going to be in my mind every time I think about this game, every time I play this game, every time I see it online, I will think Doracora the Explorer.
Doracora the Explorer. There you go.
Thank you for that. In fact, every time I see a D20 on a table, that's probably exactly what I'll think of.
Well, it's funny. The name actually came from, there's a guy I follow online who is big into D&D. Like, he's built this huge following about D&D and how to be a dungeon master. And I think I heard him use the word Doracor as like an enemy, like this big bad guy that he came up with one time. And I was like, it was like Bone Crusher Doracor. And I was like, Doracor, that's a great name. And so I think I spell it a little bit differently. But it's funny that you never know where inspiration is going to strike. But also that they use a D20, which is what D&D uses. And so it's kind of funny, these crossovers.
Well, now it's going to be Bone Crusher Doracor the Explorer.
There you go.
Well, beyond Final Flicktier, beyond Board Game Design Lab, do you have any other projects that you're working on, that you're cooking up, that you want to share with people?
Yeah, so working on several games. College football game, which I've talked a lot about on my own podcast. That's still a possibility, still waiting to kind of figure out what that's going to look like. I'm working on a really enjoyable superhero co-op game that I'm having a lot of fun with. I was working on that earlier today, just trying to get some of the mechanisms tweaked a little bit and try to make it a little more interesting. And then got a micro game, been working on for about 6 or 8 months now, that hopefully that's going to turn into something. And so, yeah, there's a handful of games. Nothing I can really speak on as far as like, this game's going to come out and this and that. It's just a lot of games I've been working on that are with publishers or almost to the point of being pitched to publishers. And hopefully over the next year or so, have more to report.
Cool. All right, man. Well, that's going to do it. Thank you so much, Gabe, for coming on to the show, tolerating me in my sick state right now with my sweet baritone. Well,
right. Slow jams coming up next.
Exactly. Jack. Like I was saying to you before we started recording, I got to start working on my Leonard Cohen covers. So please, everyone, go out and check Final Flicktier. It's on Kickstarter right now if you're listening to the podcast as it's gone up. And you can find Board Game Design Lab, the second best gaming podcast on the web, wherever you get podcasts, or at boardgamedesignlab.com. Thanks again for coming on the show, Gabe.
Yeah, really appreciate your time.
Thank you for listening to the Cardboard Herald. As always, everything we do is ad-free and audience-supported. If you'd like to help keep it that way, find the Patreon link at the top of our webpage, cardboardherald.com. We have several levels of support with various rewards. If you enjoyed the show, we do a whole bunch of other stuff, including reviews, interviews, and recommendations across writing, podcasts, and video. You can find that on our YouTube channel or by visiting any of our social media or our website. So with that out of the way, thank you again for listening to the Cardboard Herald.